Intrigue Media. Get noticed, get found.
I will be doing a very short introduction to web design. I know some of you have expressed interest. Melanie's not here, which is unfortunate, but she asked me where I learned how to code, and I'll be going over that, as well as the basics of the internet, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Having a basic knowledge of these things is extremely important in today's day and age. I know that Intrigue's Y first, as well as Matrix's Y, Mr. Anderson Y. I'm doing all this to help you guys get a better understanding of stuff that affects your day-to-day life. I know that I talked about this in the last slide, but our business has a large focus on the marketing industry, and that understanding stuff like the web, the internet, and DNS configuration is extremely important for everybody to see both websites we have live and websites that we've come down the tubes. I've also found that the best way to understand something yourself is to teach it to others, so this is going to be kind of a learning experience for me, so I hope I can do a good job. So first we're going to go over the basics. That'll be the internet, the IPs, the domain, the web, and web pages. So before we jump into anything crazy, we're just going to have to build a solid foundation on what the internet is built around and how it affects us. So just imagine that the internet is the world, and these roads here are the cables that are connecting our computers, which are houses. So you can basically go, well, not really, but you can go anywhere in the world by driving on a road and going to a different house. These houses represent computers, and the computers are represented by IPs. IPs are very long strings of numbers like this that are easy for computers to read, but not necessarily easy for humans to read. That's why we invented domains. So this IP would be going to this domain. We just have the computers do all the heavy lifting for us. When we're setting our DNS, I know that we've talked a lot about that for seeing not live websites. Seth made a video about how to do it, but I just thought I'd explain what you're doing. So a DNS is essentially a phone book that looks at these and is told where to go to find this. So when we set our DNS, we're telling our host file that this IP address goes with this one, no matter what you might see on the other side of the website, because every website has a specific DNS set for it, but we're just setting our own. So this is a web page. I hope you all know that. Every domain is made up of a website, which is made up of a bunch of web pages. You can see the DNS up here. Well, this is actually the domain. And Intrigue site would have something different. I think it's similar to the one that we had up here, but not exactly the same because I just made that number up. This little HTTP up here means that we are surfing the World Wide Web. It's an acronym that I can't remember right now. It's hypertext, something that's not really important. So to us, this is what we see. It's just visually appealing. There's actual pictures and a slider even, but that's not what computers necessarily see. They see this. So when a computer reads this, it's told to punch that all out to look like this, but we wouldn't really be able to read much of a website if it's looked like this, so we use stuff called browsers, which are Internet Chrome, Internet Explorer, Safari, those kind of things that take HTML documents like this, render them, and then punch them out to look like this so that we can read them, a lot like how IPs are then transferred to domains. So now we're going to go over the basics of HTML and exactly what it is and why something like this can turn out to look like this. Okay, so I'm just going to go over a couple of HTML examples. So this is what an HTML document looks like. This is a lot more basic than the one that we just looked at. It's just a couple of header tags or a small picture. Yeah, but so Everything in these little brackets here are called tags. There's a lot of different types of tags, like structural tags and content tags. We'll go over those in a second. And once again, this is what a website would look like if you only put HTML into it. No CSS, no JavaScript, no nothing. So that doesn't look very appealing either. So that's why we're going to talk about CSS and JavaScript down the road. I'm just going to touch on a couple more parts about HTML. So where does HTML apply? It applies in WordPress creation and formatting. I know that I deal with it on a daily basis, even though we have a what you see is what you get editor. I don't know if anybody's worked with a Brad page builder in the back of Duris, but it's when you can like click and drag elements over to just fill up your page. Usually that does work, but there's also some snags. There's snags like anchor tags and everything, which are links. And I can actually show you one. So this right here is technically called an anchor tag. It's an attribute that has, I can show you it actually. Anyways, yeah, they're anchor tags. It essentially says to the computer, there's text here, but the text also links to a specific link. I should have brought up an example of it.
We see it in our emails a lot.
Yeah.
So in this email, you'll read about in the top above the header image. If you click on that, it brings you down into the email. Is that what you mean by an anchor link?
Yeah, essentially, I wish I could just show you the actual HTML. You know what? So an anchor link would look something like this. Then you have a link here. Then you have the text here. So essentially, what this is saying is that this link represents that text, and it will send you to that. So there's a couple things that are interesting about this, and it's the stature of what's going on here. So when you're coding HTML, you'll learn this if you go through the basics that I have at the end of this. There's an opening and a closing tag. So every time you open a tag, like anchor, you have to close it over here. I know I've run into a lot of problems when you have like an entire sheet of code and you just forgot one closing tag and the entire document just blows up. So it's not fun, but when you do that kind of stuff, you're taught to look for that kind of stuff. And if you do get into it, just know that everybody's affected by it. Okay. So another interesting thing that we can look at here are structural tags. So this just shows the header of the page, but up here you can see the head, and then it goes all the way down. This is usually filled with scripts and meta tags. So I know Rob touched on that later, or last week, something like that, about search engine optimization, how title tags, such as this one, are extremely important in search engine optimization because it gives search engine robots an idea of what the page is about, so they can pull it out and give it to you when you search it. It also has a lot of meta descriptions here, which you can talk about. Well, there's a bunch of different meta things. There's meta descriptions, which show up in the search engines. So when you search something, you would say, this is a page about blank, blank, blank. But there's also meta descriptions that specify the type of language, so usually text, HTML. There's stuff up here that says this is in English, so that also factors into search engine optimization. And properties down here that I'm not really going to go into right now. That's the next lesson. So this also houses scripts, which can reference JavaScript web sheets and cascading style sheets, which I'll also talk about in a second. And that is how you make it so that your page doesn't look exactly like this. way to pretty it up. So I'll just leave you with one thing about HTML. If you're going to build a house, you need a solid foundation with walls, a roof, and everything, and HTML is essentially that. It's the very basics of your web page, but if you just use HTML, it's not going to be pretty or habitable. So also, where does this apply? I said search engine optimization. Just having one missing title tag or one missing backslash can make you go from first to last, and we all know that. Damn. Hang on, I'll show you.
See, you ain't first, you're last.
There you go.
You know what we're talking about? That phrase, a trademark, now you got a position to rig about me.
Okay, so now we're going to get into the basics of CSS. Like I said, and like Vanessa can tell you, you have to make your house pretty before you're happy with it. This is quite a pretty house, but I'm sure that Vanessa's house just looks great. So right here you're going to see, oh wait, you know what, I'll put that up here. So we're going to talk about, or go into a lot of demonstration of how sites can look different with and without CSS. So this is with CSS. It's looking all good. It's the website we all know and love. And this is what it looks like without CSS. So what is CSS? CSS is a cascading style sheet that can live in 3 separate places. It can either live inside, oh, where did my thing go? It can either live inside your tags. So if you had something like this, you would have style equals blank, 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 and that will give this specific area style. So just say you wanted to make this text blue with an underline, you would say style, color, underline, and it would only apply to this. That's not really best practice because it makes the computer render more, because it has more to read on the sheet. So what we do generally is we create a style sheet that is outside of the HTML document and is linked into it. This style sheet can apply to the entire thing. So if I said, I want to make this thing blue with an underline, you would have to make all of the anchor tags blue with an underline unless you specified, and that will be also in the next lesson. Because specification, I'm even learning how to specify. There's a level of hierarchy because there's IDs, classes, and then titles. So IDs are worth 100, classes are worth 10, and then titles are just worth 1. So whichever one has the most hierarchy, so just say you use an ID and it's 100, it would go to that immediately. An ID would be something like if you said href ID outside link, and then you would link it in the style sheet. Outside link is blue and red, so it would go blue and red. Doesn't make sense, but cool. So we talked about CSS examples. Where does this apply? It applies to web page design, obviously, because it's the design of the web page. So I know that designers always take into account the just sheer amount of effort that we'd have to put in to make some styles, and that's why we made the big change to Duris, because it's a lot simpler and it's a lot cleaner. I know Seth used to code for hours making custom CSS, which while it would make the web page extremely pretty and functional, it wouldn't do much to improve like the search engine optimization or conversions. So we've toned it down to make them simple but usable, and yeah, not extremely time consuming.
Which also makes it affordable.
Exactly. So now we're going to talk about JavaScript. So JavaScript isn't necessarily the water and electricity of your house. That's more PHP. I'm not going to talk about PHP today because you need to have a mastery of CSS, HTML, and JavaScript to talk about PHP, but JavaScript is more like the faucets and the light switches that add functionality to your house. A good example of this would be center stage. So while it does have HTML and CSS elements, all of these buttons here you see are JavaScript. They allow it to be click and get to a different link. These sliders here are JavaScript, so you're allowed to shuffle through images. It's an extremely broad and confusing language. I haven't close to mastered it, but it's an extremely important one to learn if you want your website to have a bit of flair, because we all know that just clicking on links gets boring after a while. Okay. So yeah, we have HTML, which is the foundation of your house. You have CSS, which is the decorations, and then you have JavaScript, which is the functional utility of your house. So where does this apply? I wish Melanie was here because she could tell me, but we had a problem a while back about analytics, specifically Tag Manager, how it would only run on something that you would say on a JavaScript button. The exact code would be get this and then submit. So the tag would fire when it hits submit, but we only have the anchor tag, which I showed you back in the presentation. This made it so we weren't able to track the actual conversion, so we had to go in there and change out the button so that it was a JavaScript button. And that just goes to show that the complete versatility of JavaScript and how it can be tracked by Tag Manager, as well as analytics and all those things. Web page design, as you can see, adding buttons and slider functionality is also extremely important and can only be managed through JavaScript or extremely confusing CSS. So, we're nearing the end of the presentation. If this ramble has gotten you at all interested in web design, then I've made a Google Doc of where you can go to actually practice these things. I know that being talked at doesn't exactly stay with you, but if you get into practicing these things, there's very easy courses online that you can just run through. That's what I did, and it stuck, and then I ended up learning these things. So practices that you could go through would be using Control-Shift-I. There you can see the inside of your HTML document, and you can see everything that's being displayed on the page. What I like about this view is you can also see the CSS behind your website, so if you're not exactly happy with how it looks, you can play around with it. Or you could.
So it's an application at the top, you made it red.
Oh, cool.
And now it's gray. Yeah.
Yeah, sweet.
I remember when I first started at Intrigue, Seth showed me, he pulled up Yahoo, and he's like, look at this. So then he pulled that tool up, and he replaced Yahoo's logo with Google's logo. Yeah, I thought it was so amazing. I was like, what just happened?
Yeah, see, it's a really fun thing to play around with. This will actually give you a better idea of what CSS and HTML look like. As you can see here, they do look quite different. This is HTML up here, while this is CSS down here. And then I think you can see JavaScript. But anyways, none of these changes that you make here are permanent, so you can always just go in and change Yahoo's logo to Google or something like that. And I know that when I'm designing a website, instead of coding the CSS right away, I want to play around with it here. So if you want to add different tags to anything, you can click here and then click here, and then you can add a class directly to the document instead of playing around with selectors. This is how I learned most of the selectors, because I used to be really bad at my CSS not even affecting the HTML. That's why I talked about how CSS selectors were so hard to come by, but this view right here allows you to immediately select anything that you want. So if I wanted to change that, all I have to do is click on that and then add a class. And it's really cool for solidifying your understanding of both HTML and CSS. So another thing that's a bit more confusing would be Control U, and that shows you the source of the website. So this is everything that's being affected. It's a lot like the other view, but it's more of a full view. So this is the back end of Intrigue's website. This is the slider right here. This is why we don't code JavaScript that much here. Yeah, as you can see here, these are the links to the style sheets, like I said. So the CSS is sitting outside the HTML document, but it's being called upon here, so it knows that it affects it. And then all of the information is down here. So yeah, it's a lot to look at right away, but it's extremely important to get to know these things, especially in the industry that we are in. If you want to do any reading about the extreme basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, I would recommend this website here that I put under reading. It's just like short blocks of information with pictures. It really helps you get an understanding. There's Linda, which are essentially online classes. The teacher will go over a couple things, and then you can download exercises to help follow along. I know I did that because my friend at OCAT had a free subscription, so I just mooched off of that, but it is a paid thing, so.
If anybody wants to sign up for that and actually go through it, we'd be happy to support making that happen for sure.
Cool. And then there's also community resources. I know that I always pitch Reddit, but there's a University of Reddit where they teach the basics of HTML, CSS, and they actually have classes that you can go and talk to people with. So I left the link there in case anybody wants to get in. This is probably what I'd suggest the most. It's called Code Academy, and you can just take through very basic steps, and it walks you through what you're doing and why you're doing it. It tells you if your code's right or wrong, and then at the end you've made a website. That's the first thing I did, and it really stuck with me because you were able to do HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which are three extremely important languages. Once again, I curated a subreddit that talks about all things website, so if you get really into this and you want to be blown away, going to one of these would be a learning experience for sure. You can always talk to Seth and I about what you're doing, and if you run into any problems, we'd be more than happy to help. And then two things that really stuck with me that almost made me want to become a coder more were Silicon Valley and Mr. Robot. I don't know if anybody's watched Silicon Valley, but it's an awesome TV show, and I highly suggest it. And then Mr. Robot's a lot about internet security and Linux and JavaScript, so it's also really cool. And yeah, that's it for me. I hope that what I said stuck a little bit, and if it didn't, then try out Code Academy.
Can you share everybody on the Google Doc?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. I think anybody with it at Intrigue can access, but I can send it out too.
Awesome.
Cool.
Woot.
Yeah, sweet.
Good job.
Intrigue Media. Get noticed, get found.